has taught Black and brown people anything, it's that if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And that if you don't use your voice to shape your own future, somebody else will do it for you. When I was in middle school, my mother ran for the school board. She made signs, she campaigned, and she got elected. It was the first time that I had seen a Black woman take part in the democratic process, and I was proud. It made me feel as though my voice mattered. It made me feel as though I needed to use my voice to help other people. It planted a seed in me, a seed that I am to serve and advocate for others. And I carry that seed with me today. And maybe you do too. Now listen, you may be saying, Kristen, I am nobody's elected official, and I have no desire to run for elected office. And honestly, well, politics is just not my thing. And I feel you, because I felt the same way until 2018. In 2018, the Spotlight team at the Boston Globe published a report on race. And that report had sobering statistics. It detailed who was in power, who had the money, and who was at the table making the decisions. And the findings were almost always never Black people. One example stood out to me in particular. It was the Olympics bid coming to Massachusetts. And the report detailed that there were 5 power brokers who met in secret for months, and all of them were white. The article summarized that in Boston's major industries, in politics to the boardroom, from law firms to the State House, and from labor unions to hospitals, Blacks once again find themselves outside of the insular world of Massachusetts politics and power brokers. It was an example of how when you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Now, one Black power broker was eventually invited to the table later in the process, but the bid eventually failed. I sat with that report for several years. The report also summarized that Black political achievements are more occasional than institutional. I'm gonna say that again. Blacks' political achievements are more occasional than institutional. And it's the institutional power and coalition that most always is what changes the trajectory of a city or a town. And we've done that here in Massachusetts. In the governor's office, the United States Congress, and at the Attorney General level, Blacks have been elected from Massachusetts. And while those offices are important, we are able to affect the most amount of change right in our own backyard. In Massachusetts, there are 351 cities and towns, and Black and brown people have broken barriers all across the state. People like Ruth Z. Louijean, the Boston City Council president. People like Katrina Huff Larmond, city councilor in Randolph. People like Dr. Yvonne Spicer, the first mayor of Framingham. People like Christina Horner, the first Black woman to be elected to Wellesley's school committee. People like Tito Jackson, former Boston city councilor. And people like Ayanna Pressley. All of these people have a mix of backgrounds: educators, entertainment professionals, entrepreneurs, community leaders. People like Senator Liz Miranda, a Roxbury native, a Black woman of Cabo Verdean descent. Senator Miranda has been in the Massachusetts legislature for 6 years, and she will tell you, she's not a politician or an elected official. She's a public servant. Senator Miranda has had a career as an educator, a nonprofit leader, and a community organizer. She hosted events around entertainment, and she helped curate the culture right here in Roxbury. She also suffered a lot of loss along the way, including her brother being killed. And she said that she got tired of asking, when is someone going to help us? And she said she finally looked at herself and said, why not me? And isn't that always the catalyst to change? Asking ourselves, why not me? In fact, do me a favor. I want you to turn to your neighbor and ask your neighbor, why not me? We have the ability to impact the most amount of change right in our own neighborhoods. For instance, in the 1960s, right here in Roxbury, local leaders voted to bulldoze dozens of homes in the Washington Park area. That land remained vacant for almost 40 years. It was done through eminent domain. Now, the people who were able to stay and those in neighboring areas saw their property values rise. But for Black and brown people, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in generational wealth. I'm a transplant to Massachusetts. I first moved to Boston, and then as my family grew, we moved to a Metro West suburb that is 2% Black. And in 2020, as the pandemic was raging, and we were in a racial reckoning, and George Floyd was killed, I began to ask myself, Kristen, what can you do to help? How can you be the change that you want to see? And as my practice, first, I prayed. And I said, God, what do you want me to do? And as clear as I'm talking to you right now, I heard the Lord say, run for select board. And I said, wait, no, hold on, God. Now, you must have meant that for my much more politically savvy husband. So we're going to try this again. Okay, God, what do you want me to do? And it was as if I heard the Lord say, I said what I said. So I took another step, and I mounted a last-minute write-in campaign for town meeting. I made signs, went door knocking, and I lost. But I didn't quit. The God-given assignment remained, and I was committed to seeing it through. So I took another step, and I sought wisdom. And I asked veteran town politicians, what should I do about running for select board? And you know what they told me? You're not ready. Wait your turn. And I sat with that for several years. And then I said, wait a minute now. If I continue to listen to that pushback, someone who looks like me, a wife, a mother, a full-time entrepreneur, and a full-time employee will never have a seat at the table. And I had a decision to make. So I mounted yet another campaign, this time for select board. I gathered a small but mighty team together. We went door knocking, we made phone calls, we campaigned, we made flyers, we shared on social media. And this time, when the election came, by the grace of God, we won. And not only did we won by a landslide. That same seed that my mother planted in me, the courage and the conviction to speak up on behalf of children and families, sprung up. And I wanted my daughter to feel that same thing. My daughter Lily is in the 1st grade, and I wanted her to feel seen and heard and represented the way my mother made me feel. In the 1980s, in the Dudley Street Park neighborhood, they voted. The local leaders determined that by eminent domain, they were tired of the dumping. And so they formed something called the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, or DSNI. And local leaders came together. They came together and they petitioned their local leaders to take more than 15 acres of land, and they won their petition. They won their petition, and over time, they revitalized the Dudley Street neighborhood. I may be the first Black woman select board member in Natick, but I stand on the shoulders of so many people who have fought and sacrificed for us so that we can live in neighborhoods that thrive. We need people at every single table and every single representation. Now, you may not run for elected office. You might be the person to run somebody's campaign, or you may be the person to host an important meeting, or you might be the person to make some bomb macaroni and cheese, because we need to be able to work and eat at the same time. But whatever your gift is, we need it at the table. Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small, thoughtful, committed group of citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Listen, y'all, it is time to take our seat at the table and not settle for being an item on the menu. Thank you.